Greetings to you. Welcome to this moment of worship and reflection, courtesy of All Saints Anglican Church. Shall we join together as we open our time of worship in prayer? Would you respond in the words that are in yellow? The sun rises and it is light. The night falls and it is dark. Bless the one who gives the life. Sow the seed and cut the corn. Bear the child and build the house. Bless the one who gives the life. Lay the stone and light the fire. Cast the net and water the earth. And bless the one who gives the life. Serve the guest and pay the price. Nail the wood and pick the flowers. Bless the one who gives the life. Make the wine and bake the bread. Pour the wine and break the bread. Bless the one who gives the life. We light this candle, remembering Jesus Christ, the light of the world, who is with us. Shall we enjoy the light together? I'm wondering if you can remember a time when you were exceedingly thirsty, absolutely parched. It could be a time when you'd done something excessive, some excessive exercise perhaps, or physical activity. I certainly know that mowing the lawn in the heat of summer is the kind of activity that makes me very thirsty. Sport perhaps, out on a hiking trail, something like that. Can you remember a moment when you were desperately, desperately thirsty? Thirsty beyond just needing a cup of tea, but something you really need to drink something. Can you remember that? One of my fond memories from playing sports in high school was of being thirsty. I know that sounds a bit bizarre, but it's something that's always stayed with me. When I was in high school and specifically playing hockey, I was a part of a group of guys who were quite serious about their hockey, and we had a few coaches who were quite serious. And so we would finish school, the bell would ring, we'd rush off to the change rooms, we'd hop into our kit, and we'd be out on the field, and we would practice. And our practice was always split into two: an hour-long training session for exercise, fitness, skills, all the rest of it, and then the last half an hour was a game. And so that first hour, you would really just hammer it. You just went totally. There was no chance for a rest. There was no chance for a break. In those days, there weren't water bottles that you carried with you everywhere like today. And by the time the hour was up, you were absolutely parched. You desperately needed a drink. And there were only 3 drinking fountains. And there was always 12 in the team. And often there were 2 teams practicing at once and taking a break at the same time. So you can imagine the stampede that used to happen as you rushed to get a chance to have something to drink. And it didn't matter, what the tap water actually tasted like. You just drank it because you really were thirsty. You really needed a drink. The trick with it, though, and I think those who play sport or played sport will know this, that when you are exceptionally thirsty and you're playing sport, it's not a good idea to drink too much, okay? So that was part of the thing. You were desperately thirsty, but you had to manage your consuming of the water, the amount you consumed. Because if you drank too much, what happened in the second half of the thing? You'd be hobbling around with a stitch. Ooh, feel like you're dying. So it was just one of those things. You had to sort of learn to manage it. But there was nothing like that taste of water when you are so thirsty. And so I'm wondering about this cup of water that Jesus is speaking about. Last week, I did a little bit of a Biblical Studies 101 lesson as we learnt about exegeting a passage. And I said to you, eisegesis is when you make a passage say what you want it to say. Exegesis is when you do the passage as much justice as you can and you try to hear what the passage is actually saying. Exegesis is a pot with 3 legs. Okay? The first leg goes behind the text. Okay? It goes to the history. It goes to the context. It acknowledges that any letter, any document was written by a person for a group of people, had a purpose in mind, okay? And it tries to honor that, to ask the question, so who was Matthew writing for? What was the historical context at the time? What was going on in the church? And then from there you move to the second leg, which is to go into the passage. And you start in the passage by asking, so what do I think the first readers of this passage would have heard? So we try to hear the message to that original audience. And then lastly, we jump ahead of the text to our own context. And we ask the question, so what might God be saying to me, to us today through this? Okay. Now we're still in Matthew 10 today, and let me just remind you of some of that context so that we're in the right space. We acknowledged last week that the Gospel of Matthew was written around about 80-85 AD. Most theological scholars agree on that. Some don't. There's always those who don't agree on the things, but the majority agree that that's sort of where it was written. It was written after the Gospel of Mark. That's important. Mark was written around about 60-64 AD. And Matthew uses Mark, as does Luke. Okay? 85% of Matthew is repeated in, 85% of Mark is repeated in Matthew. Okay? Matthew uses for his source Mark, and then there's some common material that Luke and Matthew use, and then Matthew has his own material. So most of what we have in chapter 10 here is only found in Matthew. Okay? Matthew is written from the perspective of a Jewish Christian, written for the Jewish Christian church. Okay? And that's why Matthew uses so much of the Old Testament as opposed to Luke, who uses hardly anything. Luke wasn't writing for Jews. Luke was writing for Gentile Christians who knew nothing of the Old Testament, really. Matthew has this uniquely Jewish feel to it. Importance of the festivals, for example. Matthew has 5 teaching sections which match the 5 books of Moses, and so that's all a part of the construct. These teaching sections, just by the way, if you're wondering how they figured out, that there were these 5 sections of teaching, each of the teaching sections ends with the same words, when Jesus had finished. That's the phrase that's used. So in fact, the passage we read today is the end of that teaching. So verse 42 ends it, and then chapter 11, verse 1, after Jesus had finished. Okay, that phrase occurs 5 times in the Gospel of Matthew, each time after one of those teaching sections. Okay. The other thing is that Matthew has this uniquely Palestinian, first century Palestinian structure. He designs the Gospel as a chiasmus. It has a chiastic structure. Okay? And a chiasmus, if you want to have it in your mind, if you need an image, it's like an hourglass. Okay? It goes in like this to the middle and out. All right? Now that is very different to the way we as Westerners structure our stories. Okay? We like stories that have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Where do you find the moral of the story? Where do you find it? At the end, of course. You don't introduce the story with the moral. It's always at the end. A chiastic structure doesn't have the moral at the end. A chiastic structure has the meaning and the purpose, the pivotal thing in the middle. Okay, so in Matthew's Gospel, the pivotal chapter, and it's almost exactly the chapter in this case, is chapter 13. Now, I'm going on leave for 2 weeks, but when I get back, we'll be in chapter 13. And I think I get 2 weeks of talking chapter 13 with you. So don't miss that, because if you want to understand the Gospel of Matthew, then you need to understand Matthew chapter 13. And we'll look at that over 2 weeks there, okay? So chapter 10 is a part of the second teaching section, and because the chiasmus works to the middle, it has these pairs that work together, okay? And so chapter 10 and chapter 18 are the pairs, and it's the second and the fourth teaching section. So if you want to understand chapter 10, you daren't leave out chapter 18. The two must be read together, because they add to each other, they complement, they contradict. There's stuff in there that's going on. Okay, so let me give you a simple example. There's this strange phrase in the passage we read today. Okay, if anyone gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones, because he is my disciple. That phrase, one of these little ones, occurs only twice in Matthew. Once in chapter 10 and once in chapter 18. Coincidence? No. The two go together. They complement each other. They're trying to teach us something. Okay. Now, you want to see how we can get ourselves in a bit of a mess in the scriptures. In chapter 18, you start the chapter with the disciples arguing over who's the greatest. And they ask Jesus, who's the greatest in the kingdom? Jesus takes a child and places the child in their midst and says, if you want to be the greatest, become like one of these children. We jump a paragraph and he says in the next sentence, if any of you causes one of these little ones who are my disciple to stumble, it would be better that you put a millstone around your neck and drown yourself in the lake or something like that. Okay? Now, if you just read that like that, it seems that these little ones is referring to the children. Jesus has put them in front and whatever, and it looks like a lesson on youth ministry. And I know when I was training to be a Sunday school teacher, that passage was placed in front of me. And we were told in no uncertain terms, this is your responsibility to children. But in fact, as much as children would be included, this is not just about children. It's not a lesson for youth ministry. Because in both, Jesus is speaking about these little ones who are my disciples. It's about those who are following Jesus. And in fact, what he's doing is he's talking about how to treat each other in the church. So part of the context of Matthew's gospel is the state of the church at that time. I think too often we have a view of the church, first century Palestine, as being this beautiful, united community. But the church was suffering division right from the beginning. Struggling with unity from the start. When John's gospel is written, just 80 years after Jesus, John has to devote a significant amount of his time in his gospel on unity. The whole of chapter 17, unity. Remain in me and I will remain in you. Grafted to the vine. All of these things about unity. Why? Because the church was divided. The church was breaking. The church was not behaving very nicely towards each other. And so in chapter 10 and 18, when Matthew is dealing with some of the issues that the Christian church was facing at that time, a part of the thing that he's addressing is the way Christians are behaving towards each other. The way Christians are treating each other. And so that phrase in chapter 18, any of you causes one of these little ones who is my disciple to stumble, it's not just about children. It's about how you relate to your Christian neighbor and your responsibility towards them. Now, 2 weeks ago, I think it was 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, we talked about the death of George Floyd in America, and we were reflecting on the image of God and so on. And I told you the story about Mother Teresa. And when she was asked about her work, how do you sustain it? How do you carry on? And she said to the person interviewing her, oh, it's easy. I just look into the person's eyes and I see Jesus in them, and then I treat them like I would Jesus. Now, it's a great story. It's a story that has inspired me over the years and helped me over the years. But there's a converse to the story. There's a flip side to the story. Because if I see in the other the image of Christ, I must be willing to recognize that I am also a bearer of the image of Christ. Inasmuch as when she looked into those people's eyes, she could see Christ, you must be able to look in the mirror and see Christ in you. The mystic Julian of Norwich said that the great struggle of humanity is to discover that we are clothed in the goodness of God. Clothed in the goodness of God. That's not got anything to do with us being good people. It's in us realizing that we carry the image of God, and that when we accept Christ, Christ is in us, and we are a bearer of the image of Christ. And so that must flow out of us in our behavior. It must issue forth from us. I often say to you, be salt and be light. And the truth is, you will never be able to do that or be that or understand it unless you understand that Christ is in you. That you bear Christ in you. And that you are able then to be Christ to another. And so I guess my wondering today, relating to this cup of water, is I wonder what opportunities you have at the moment to offer someone who is desperately parched a clear, cool drink of water. And this is not about being good in the community. This is not the neighbor who's out there. This is the neighbor who's inside these walls, inside this community. It is the person who's a part of our fellowship. It's the person who goes to another denomination who we encounter, who is struggling in their faith, who is desperate for a cool drink of living water. Water is such a powerful image for Jesus. When he meets that woman at the well, they talk about living water. When he's dying on the cross, he asks for a drink of water. Sometimes we behave like those who were at the cross. And when someone asks for water, needs water, we hand them a sponge with wine vinegar on it. Now, I know some people will say it's got medicinal properties. Jesus didn't need medicine. He needed a cool drink. And what they gave him was the sour, gross stuff. I wonder who is in your life right now who just needs a drink of cool water. I wonder if you can see that you are cloaked in God's goodness, that you are the bearer of Christ. I wonder if you can be Christ to your neighbor. Let's be still for a moment.
In Christ alone my hope is found. He is my light, my strength, my song. This cornerstone, this solid ground, firm through the fiercest drought and storm. What heights of love, what depths of peace, when fears are still, when striving cease. My comforter, my all in all, here in the love of Christ I stand. In Christ alone, who took on flesh, fullness of God in helpless pain, this gift of love and righteousness, scorned by the ones he came to save, till on that cross as Jesus died, the wrath of God was satisfied. For every sin on him was laid. Here in the death of Christ I live. There in the ground his body lay. Light of the world by darkness slain. Then bursting forth in glorious day, up from the grave he rose again. And as he stands in victory, since curse has lost its grip on me, for I am his and he is mine, bought with the precious blood of Christ. No guilt in life, no fear in death. This is the power of Christ in me, from life's first cry to final breath. Jesus commands my destiny. No power of hell, no scheme of man can ever pluck me from his hand, till he returns or calls me home. Here in the power of Christ I'll stand. No power of hell, no scheme of man can ever pluck me from his hand, till he returns or calls me home. Here in the power of Christ I'll stand.
So, friends, our time of worship comes to a close. Let us pray. O God of love, you have been with us at the world's beginning. Be with us till the world's end. You have been with us at our life's shaping. Be with us at our life's end. You have been with us at the sun's rising. Be with us till the day's end. Now watch closely as I change the light. The light that was once only in one place at one time, now changing, thinning, as it spreads to fill the whole room. Anywhere you go in this room, you can come close to the light. Anywhere you go in all of creation, you can come close to the light. Even where you are right now, you can come close to the light. Friends, my prayer for you is that you will live close to the light until we meet again. Amen.
The Lord bless you and keep you.
Make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Lord, turn his face toward you
And give you peace. The Lord bless you and keep you. Make his face shine upon you
and be gracious to you.
The Lord turn his face toward you
And give you peace.
The Lord bless you
And keep you. Make his face shine upon you.
and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you
And give you peace.
Amen. Amen.
Pray a blessing, manna rain down from heaven. This isn't second guessing, we know that we are protected. May the peace that surpasses all understanding be our message. Grace and favors in your nature, in your
May
essence.
his favor be upon you and 1,000 generations,
And your family, and your children,
and the children, and the children May his favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, and their children, and their children. May his favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, and their children, and their children.